Welcome back everybody to another Ticket Racing 2 video. It's been a while since I uploaded my last one. I've been making very slow progress, and because I'm remaking it in GB Studio 3, it means that a lot of what I'm doing you've already seen. I'm just making it a lot cleaner and I'm making it a lot more optimized to try and make the game as big as possible without going beyond the limits of GB Studio. So as you can see here, I did put in all of the cars that you would be able to play as in the game, which obviously is something like 223, and it does mean that the project lags a lot. I was considering deleting a lot right now so that I could add them back in the future, and it would mean that I would be able to, operate a bit quicker. As you can see, it's really slow. If you remember, a couple weeks ago, I made a video about making large projects, and I would like to add some points to that right now in this video, because I have learned quite a bit from trying to optimize the old code from Ticket Racing 2 into GB Studio 3 to create this version. I would consider this a huge project. It doesn't mean it's a huge game, it just means it's a huge project. But I'd like to start by discussing how I actually am working on this project. So as you can see, I'm in GB Studio 3 here. As you can see, I implemented one version of drag racing, and I've also started to implement the circuit racing again. In one of my videos about optimizing GIMP so that it does some of the work for you, I talked about having a spreadsheet and having all the values in the spreadsheet basically feed into GIMP. And you guys were asking, is it possible to feed the spreadsheet into GB Studio? Obviously, I wouldn't consider myself a programmer despite, programming this game, but I don't think I know a way of doing that. But instead, as you can see here, I'm using the stats and they're actual actors with numbers on. And this means that I could update the value here, in this section stat. When this scene starts, it sets the section stat, and then it sets the correct value here, which means that I could change it if I wanted to. The only thing that I would, if I wanted to change the artwork for this, then I would have to update that. But by doing this, actually as well, there's the length here. I don't have that as an actor, but hopefully that shouldn't matter too much. But minimizing the amount of stuff I'd have to go back into GIMP to do is fantastic. So that is one way of doing it. And I also would like to discuss numbers while I'm here. As you can see, the numbers can actually go up to 30 in this game, as like the stats here. The fuel can go up to 255. So the stats of the cars can go up to 30. And as you can see, there's only one actor here. And to display all those numbers up to 30, from 0 up to 30, I have a sprite that has all 30 of the frames be connected to the numbers. So now that we have in GB Studio 3 this new sprite editor, it means that I can have all the way up to 99 frames, which means 100 frames because there's a 0 frame, and that's 0. And as you can see, it's only using these tiles here. So technically it's 10 plus the blank one, because the blank one's the same each time. So technically it's 10 or 11, depending on if you actually do use the blank tile in the sprite editor here. So as you can see, if I hover over it, it's 9 and 9 here, and then obviously 9 and 8. And all this means is there's 2 tiles, and there are 10 unique tiles in this whole. There's 10 unique tiles in this whole sprite, and there's obviously 2 tiles in this frame. So I have tried to minimize the amount of stuff going on. In GB Studio 2, that wasn't exactly possible, because even if what's actually in the frame was exactly the same as a different frame, it would still count as a fresh new frame. So this new version of GB Studio is fantastic for this reason. One thing I did find is that it doesn't go up to 255. I put in 255, which technically means 256 because of the 0. And unfortunately, you couldn't update the frame using a variable. Obviously, this is how this works, is by updating the frame to the variable. If I go into the initiate here, we're setting the speed here to the animation frame of the section stat speed using the variable here. So instead of it just being a number that we set, we can set it to a variable. And I think when you're setting it by number, it doesn't go beyond 25. If you remember in the original GB Studio, there was only 25 frames. So by setting it by number, it means that you're still limited by that. But by setting it to variable, you can technically use 255, but because it's on 100, it will loop back around and it won't display, the hundreds value technically. So obviously, as you can see, the fuel, it basically has a second one to act as the hundreds value for the fuel. I know it's still very technical, but I'm hoping that, if you're developing your own games, these kind of tips will be useful to you guys. Yeah, so I found that 255 or 256 frames, the numbers going up to 255, didn't work. And so I tried it about 150, and that didn't work either. So I settled on the 99 because that did work. So it might be that it's limited to 100. I haven't done the exact number testing. If you are going beyond 100, you're probably going up to 255. So by splitting it up into the hundreds value in one actor as the 2, and then the 55 in the second actor, it works like that just fine. And the great thing is I'm still under the actor limit, and obviously the unique tile limit as well, because of the new GB Studio version. It works perfectly, and it actually makes it a lot easier. So I have basically refactored that aspect of the game to fit into that nicely. You may be wondering, how am I actually working? Like, am I copy and pasting from the previous project? And the answer is no. Here we are in the old project. Basically, I have 3 versions of GB Studio open at once. I have the main version, which you just saw, this old version, so that I can check the logic and look at what I did before and then try and rethink it to optimize it. And then a third version, which is like the prototype build, basically, where I can just copy and paste scenes into that version, and it doesn't have the lag that these huge projects have. You see, I just zoomed in and the lag is incredible. I have noticed, though, that the lag is much less in GB Studio 3 than it is in GB Studio 2, so they definitely optimized the engine. I'm very happy with the work that these guys do. And so yeah, so basically I would, for example, go into a scene like this, and I would obviously have to wait for it to show up. And then I'd, check what I did before. And because it has been a long time since I did the original logic for this, I have learned a lot. And I have new knowledge about what does and doesn't work, not only about programming, but also about the actual game design. And I've got a lot of feedback from people who have played the game and who either were confused by it or had suggestions for things that might make it better. So by looking at this and obviously opening up these things and checking what I did before, it means that this new version is much cleaner and simpler and hopefully a lot more optimized. The optimization is what I care about the most, because if I don't optimize it now, then I will have to go back and optimize it, which takes up time. And it means that when I'm copy and pasting things around, it's just a lot of hassle. It also means that I might not be able to fit in everything that I wanted into this game, and that would slow me down as well. Currently, this is taking me so long, and because I haven't put a video up for so long as well, I feel like maybe the project is stagnating, but I'm hopefully still moving forward very slowly. I haven't uploaded to Instagram for a while, unfortunately. I need to get back into doing that. I've been trying to focus on the actual gameplay more than anything, and I keep forgetting to upload onto Instagram, so I definitely need to start doing that again. Another optimization that I think I found is about randomization. In the old project, the AI basically would choose how they drove. Obviously, this is a racing game, and the player gets to choose how they drive. But before, the AI would randomly choose how they wanted to drive, and it would be almost exactly the same as the player's version of driving. So in this one, I've rethought about how the driving works. And I have come to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter how realistic they drive compared to the player, because you don't see what they're doing exactly. And I could fake it more, but I feel like by making it too different, it means that it's harder to balance, right? It's harder to make sure that the player has the correct, for example, car stats to beat the other cars if the logic that we're using for the AI and the player is different. So I am keeping it very similar, but instead of it being random, I'm now doing it so they basically check to see how much fuel they have and how long the track is. And then they basically say to themselves, do I have enough fuel to complete this lap on driving fast? And then if they say yes, then they will drive fast. And if they don't have enough to even drive on eco, then they will drive eco, and obviously go into the pit. And obviously the opposite of that would be they just drive normally. So hopefully there is less reliance on randomization. And I recommend not relying on randomization in your games as well. I know that can be hard in some game genres and some game types, but if we have a look on GB Studio Central here, you guys should definitely, follow this news outlet on Twitter and whatnot. They do some great stuff and they write all their information down. But basically, this article is about how the Game Boy does not really have randomness, and that when there is randomness, it can be reliant on, or it should be reliant on input rather than, on initiate. Because when a scene initiates, every value in that scene is probably the same as it was last time you entered the scene, and therefore the randomness does not exist. And even when you do have input randomness, where it's based on a player's input, it will have patterns, and it isn't great. So randomness isn't a great idea if your game relies on it, because there will be patterns and things that go against basic logic. For example, if you say there's a 1 in 100 chance that the value is, for example, 48. Then the value 48 might actually be in that pattern and come up every 5th time, right? And that means it's actually a 1 in 5 chance rather than a 1 in 100 chance, right? So that's just an example of how the pattern of the randomness can destroy your game. So it might not be a great idea to use randomness and instead use, counters where it counts down, and when it gets to a certain point, then it does the action, or it prioritizes a certain action and then goes to that second, more unlikely action if it can't do the original action. It really depends on what game you're using. I'm trying to make it as general as possible, but yeah, I'll just go back to numbers. And if you remember, in this game, there is fuel, right? And as you go around the track, then you obviously burn your fuel depending on how you drive, and you eventually need to go into the pit to get your fuel back. That's basically how the game works. And obviously there are speed stats, braking stats, handling stats, and it adds up to the player's lap time, which then is compared to the AI races to decide who is in first position, basically. So there is a lot of adding and just general numbers coming together. And I did find that there were some issues that I may not have noticed in the original Take It Racing 2 demo, where basically if the numbers are too big and you're adding multiple of them together at the same time, it will obviously clamp to 255. And when I originally designed the demo of Take It Racing 2, I was only using the small numbers that were from the very basic cars. But now that I've designed the future of the game, and I have cars that the stats go up to 30, and tracks that have stats that go beyond 25 or up to 25, it means that the numbers get very unwieldy, and I've had to design a system that basically breaks everything down and divides before it multiplies. For example, the length here you see is 0.8. So in reality, to get the amount of fuel you burn, you would take your car's fuel consumption and times it by 0.8. And so you get 80% of what the original number is. You can't exactly do that in GB Studio or on the Game Boy because of the fact that the values clamp at 255. So looking at these numbers, let's imagine that our fuel consumption was 30, which is the maximum it can be. And this is the length of 0.8, right? So you can't use point values in GB Studio. You have to use full integers. So let's imagine we do 30 and we times it by 8. We get 240, which is in the 255 limit. And then when obviously we divide it by 10, we get 24. So that is a completely fine way of doing it. But let's go back to the example of the time, where each of these could be 30. And I think even these values are timed by the length of the section. So when you run out of fuel, you're basically limping along the track, meaning that all your stats are 0, meaning that if the track stats are 30, 30, 30, it means that you would be going through at 90 with 90 points, right? So with this for numbers. So I had to come up with a way where I would basically go around that. So instead, now I would say 90 divided by 5, which basically, how we would divide it by 10? I'm dividing it by 5 first. To go on top of that, I also divide the 0.8 by 2, and then times the whole thing by 4. And it comes out at 72, right? Which it would come out as 720 anyway, I believe. Basically, what I'm saying is I've had to think about how the numbers come together in order to minimize the loss of value from the 255 clamp. The numbers also get quite difficult once it goes beyond the 0.8. The 0.8 is a great example of, of how it's good to keep the values small. But I have like a section in one of my tracks that has 2.6 kilometers. So that as well has another problem where I've had to fix it by breaking up the 2 and then the 0.5 separately. So obviously I'd do the times 2 first, and then I would do the 0.5, which would be timesing it by 5 and then dividing it by 10. But some examples like that, where it's a odd value, I believe that the value is rounding down when it halves. So yeah, there is some loss, but it's manageable loss, and it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because the numbers are so large that it's hard to really tell the difference. So yeah, when you're making large games with high numbers, please keep in mind the actual clampings of the values. And keeping those values as small as well is important because that 72 is a great example. Like if I was to add it to 99, which is the maximum that the basic time value can be, then it goes beyond 100, and then I basically take the hundreds value and put it up into the next value, which is like I was doing with the fuel, but I'm doing it for time as well. And then everything is built around that. As well with the time, I've had to make it so the lap times, or like the amount of laps there are in each track, is limited depending on the maximum amount of stats that there can be on the track, basically. So if the track has very high stats, it has to have very low laps in order to make sure that the maximum time that they can have doesn't hit that ceiling. So yeah, there is a lot more in this project that I have ran into that has slowed me down, and that's part of the reason why I haven't uploaded in so long. An update on Take It Racing 2. But yeah, I think I've overcome those problems now, so I would love to start sharing some more and making sure that everything is open to you guys. My plan for this is to get 1950 into the game. If you remember this spreadsheet I have, it basically has all of the values for all the tracks and all the cars that I want to put into the game. And as you can see here, 1950 has 4 races, 2 of which are point-to-point rallies. I also have drag races over here, which I believe there are 2 drag races. If we look at the cars, there'll be 1950 cars. And I would love for just the year 1950 to be in the game, and then I would be able to upload the demo again, get some feedback before I basically make everything else. I have no idea how long that would take me, but I would love to have it done by the end of June. I feel like that might be too soon because of just how much work this is and how slow I've gone so far, but hopefully I hope that I speed up because this is taking forever. I have plans to rework my Patreon and everything and make sure that I am offering rewards to people who only want to, put in less money as well. I feel like I've learned a lot from Patreon already and about how you guys support me there. Some of you don't talk at all, but other people are quite, lively. I appreciate both kinds of people. But yeah, I would love to be able to, focus more on my videos and the Patreon, but this is taking up a lot of time. I did consider putting it to one side at one point just because of how much time it is taking out of my, schedule of everything else. But I've been working on it for so long, it's not that much work left in order to get our second demo. I'm definitely going to keep working on it. I may try and work on other things at once. Now I've got past this hurdle of figuring out all these number problems. I feel like I can get back into just, working like a machine and copy pasting and making sure everything is exactly how it should be. And then making sure that the 1950 is done at least. And then I can maybe put it to one side for a couple months and make sure that, I'm not neglecting everything else. And make sure I get some proper feedback. That is one of the most important things of this game. I feel like it's not a game that is so obvious that you get it instantly. I have to make sure I will design the tutorial, and I haven't even started considering that yet. Yeah, everything is still on the table, and I'm glad I'm making this update. But yeah, I hope some of these tips were useful. I hope it was good listening and seeing how I work on this huge project. I definitely wouldn't recommend huge projects in GB Studio to anyone else. This is a lot of work, and I don't think that I would want to do this again in the future. I would definitely want to make games that aren't so, spreadsheet heavy. If you have a spreadsheet with over 800 things in it, like I did when I first, started doing all these cars, it definitely kind of shows that you have too much. You're kind of planning too much. But at the same time, if you really boil it down, it's just numbers and pixels. So take it as you wish. Yeah, I'll put my patrons up on the screen right now. Thank you very much to you guys. You guys are the best. I really hope I can speed up on this and get a demo out. I would love to get some feedback from you guys. If you want any feedback on your projects, please let me know. I would love to give at least 5 minutes to you and give you a new player's perspective if you have anything that needs fresh eyes. But yeah, remember to like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.